Masechet Menaḥot, Daf Chaf Bet. Ve'asim depeshita leletana d'mishel sibur minelan. On the previous daf, we cited a baraita that said that when someone brings a korban, anyone, a kohen, Israel, they don't have to bring their own wood to burn the korban upon. Rather, the wood is provided from communal funds. Now we say, regarding wood, where it's understood as obvious to the Tana that comes from the community, unlike salt. Salt, we had a whole discussion. Does the salt, someone have to bring the salt? We had a lot of discussion about it. Is there a difference between Kohen and Israel? But wood, we took it as a simple matter that you don't have to bring your own wood. Fine, but what's the source? Tanya, Yachol ha'omer hare alai ola yavi asim mitoch beto, kederech shemebi nesachim mitoch beto. Braita says, can it be that if someone vows to bring a korban ola, perhaps he has to bring wood also from his house? He has to pay for the wood. Just like when you say hare alai ola, it means not only the animal, but you're also going to have to bring wine for the wine libation, and that you have to pay for. It's assumed it comes along with it. So you might think maybe the wood also. Talmud omar al ha'esim asher al ha'esh asher al ha'mizbeach. Ma mizbeach mishel sibur af esim ve'esh mishel sibur. Diber Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon. Therefore, the pasuk comes to say that you're going to burn it on the wood that's on the fire, that's on the mizbeach. So it's comparing the wood and the fire and the mizbeach. Just like the mizbeach, you don't have to bring your own mizbeach. You don't have to bring your own stones to build one. Rather, you use the communal altar. So too, the wood and the fire is a communal one, and you don't have to go and bring your own wood or bring your own fire starter. That's the opinion of Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon. There's another opinion. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua Omer. He's going to agree, of course, that you use communal wood, but he has yet an additional requirement. Ma mizbeach shelo nishtamesh bo hedyot, af esim ve'esh shelo nishtamesh bahen hedyot. This comparison in the pasuk, in regard from the wood to the mizbeach, teaches us an additional law that just like the mizbeach has to be something that was not used by an ordinary person. The mizbeach has to be made from fresh materials. Go get some fresh stones. Don't go and get, someone's house was knocked down and you get some rubble from the house and then use that to build the mizbeach. No, you go and get fresh materials. So too, the wood and the fire can't be something that, someone had a chair and the chair broke. Go bring the wood and use it on the mizbeach, or borrow a fire that someone made already. No, it has to be all new and newly made, and not used by an ordinary person. My benaihu, what would be a practical difference between Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua? Yika benaihu hadateh. The difference would be regarding something new. That is, if it is new, then everybody would agree it's okay. But if it's not new, then Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon said it's still okay, as long as it's owned by the community. And so they had some communal property, and it was used for something before that wood, and now you want to use it for the mizbech, that's okay. But as long as it's communal property, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua says, yes, it has to be a communal property, but also the requirement that it be new is unique to Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Now we ask, really, according to Rabbi Elazar, if it's something is old, meaning used wood, cannot be burnt on the mizbeach. V'haketib. Vayomer Aravna el David. Yikach v'ya'al Adoni hamelech hato be'enav re'eh ha'bakar la'olav ha'morigim uchle ha'bakar la'esim. After all, when King David bought Goren Aravna, the site for the future Bet HaMikdash, Aravna was very acceptable and compliant, and he said to David, yes, please, take the land and take and offer up what seems good to him. Behold, look, there's oxen for burnt offerings. So in other words, not only the land, but have these animals. You can take them and use them for korbanot. And the threshing instrument and the equipment of the oxen for wood. In other words, there were different tools around, a sled, that they used for threshing, as we'll see in a second, and other tools that were used for the oxen, a yoke made out of wood. And so you could take these, and I'm donating them, and you can use it for the korbanot. Now, these are used items, and yet it says here that he's donating them, and they're going to use them to burn on the Mizbeach. And the answer is Hachaname bechadeti. No, this Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua would have to answer that. This is talking about new instruments. It's true they were made into a tool, but this yoke and that threshing board were never used. It's a new thing. He never actually used it, and he's donating it. So that's okay, as long as it was never used. My modigim. Now it says here in the pasuk that he's going to say here, you could take these modigim. What is that? Amar ula mita shel turbal. It's a turbal bed. Well, that's not very helpful. So we ask, my mita shel turbal. Amar Rav Yehuda iza de kur kesa de dashu ba dishta'eh. It's a serrated board that threshers use for threshing. When you have grain and you need to separate the kernels from the chaff, so you put it all on the threshing floor, a big flat floor, and you take this. It's a board, it's like a sled, and it has nails on the bottom, and then you put some weight on it, stand on it, and you have an animal that pulls it. And then these nails will crush the grain and separate the chaff from the kernels. And so this is that's what a turbal bed is, and so that's what we're talking about. It makes sense. It was God and Aravna. Aravna was giving his threshing floor, so it makes sense that he has threshing instruments on it. Amar Rav Yosef, my kira'a, is there a pasuk from which we can learn this word? Hine samtich lemorag harutz hadash Ba'al Pifiyot Tadush Harim. Yes, a pasuk in Yeshaya that Hashem says, I'm going to make you, Bnei Israel, like a new threshing sledge with sharp teeth, and you shall thresh mountains. Any mountains, any obstacles in your way, you'll have something like this, and you just mow them down and make your way flat. So we see tadush, right? And the analogy is to a threshing instrument, and so that's how we see that the word morag and modigim means a threshing board. Next Mishnah, nitarev kumsa bekometz haverta b'minchat kohanim, b'minchat kohen Mashiach, b'minchat nesachim keshera. If someone has a kometz, good. You took a kometz from a proper korban mincha, everything's good, and it got mixed up with another kometz from a different korban mincha. No problem. Both of them are going to be burnt on the mizbeach, so just burn them both. Or if a kometz from a regular korban mincha gets mixed up with the Minchat Kohanim, or Minchat Kohen Mashiach, or Minchat Nesachim. In those three, not only in those three, all of the flour is burnt on the Mizbeach. And so you have a kometz from a regular Korban Mincha, from a Yisrael, where only the kometz is burnt, with one of these three, where the entire thing is burnt, the Kohanim do not eat anything. That's also okay, because all of it is meant to be burnt on Mizbeach. It got mixed together. That's okay, so burn it all together. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, b'minchat kohen Mashiach, b'minchat nesachim, pesula, shezo belilata ava, vezo belilata raka, vehen bolot zo mizo. Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll agree if it's the same type, like if one kometz got mixed up with another kometz, that's fine. However, if it's a Minchat Kohen Mashiach or Minchat Nesachim that gets mixed up with a regular kometz, it's no good, because the ratios of flour to oil are different. Regarding a regular kometz, you have one log for every asiri ta'efa, 1-to-1. But for these two, the korban mincha that the Kohen Gadol brings every day, and korban mincha that comes along with a korban shelamim, there the ratio is 3 log of oil to every 1 asiri ta'efa. So that's much more liquidy. And so that's what he's saying. This one has a thick batter. The regular korban mincha is a thick batter, whereas the other ones are a thin batter. They're very liquidy. And now if they get mixed together, they're going to absorb from each other, and that excess oil from the minchat kohen Mashiach is going to go into the the komets, and the komets then will be the wrong ratio, and vice versa. It'll take some from the other, and then the others will be also the wrong ratio. And so therefore, the Yehuda says you can only mix together and burn it together if it's the same ratio, but not if it's two korban minchas with different ratios. Tanan hatam. Now we're going to bring in a Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim, and from this Mishnah we're going to see also an opinion of the Yehuda, but we're going to question this statement of Rabbi Yehuda from the previous statement of Rabbi Yehuda that we just saw in our Mishnah. That Mishnah talks about also mixing, but this time mixing of blood with other things. Dam shenitare b'mayim im yesh bo mar'i dam kasher. You have sacrificial blood. Very good, perfectly good blood, but it got mixed up with water. So it depends how much water there is. If it still looks like blood, then you can still sprinkle that blood. It's no problem. If there's so much water that it's so diluted that it just looks like, pinkish water, so it doesn't look like blood anymore, then it's no good. If nitare beyayin, ro'ino tokilu humayim. If the blood got mixed up with wine, red wine, now the color is the same. So even if there's a lot of wine, it would still look red. It still might look like blood. So then what do? Here's what we say. We consider as if the wine was water, and we say if there was that much water, would it dilute the color? So if you know how much wine there is, it was a gallon of wine fell into this blood. Well, we can't tell from the color because it's all the same, but we take that same amount of blood. If a gallon of water had fallen into that amount of blood, would it still look like blood? And that's how you can decide. Or what if one type of blood gets mixed up with another? Sacrificial blood gets mixed up with non-sacrificial blood. Blood from a regular animal, an animal that is a behema, it's a type of animal that could be a sacrifice, but this one is not. Or chaya, like deer blood, which a deer can never be a sacrifice, but it's still kosher. So if this happens, if it gets mixed up with other blood, then we consider it also like water, even though these things are not sacrificable. Blood, it's either non-kodesh or not even kosher as a sacrifice. That's okay. We still consider it like water. Water also, and you're not supposed to be sprinkling onto the mizbeach, but that's okay, as long as if it were, here's blood and blood, so it's always going to look like blood. But we consider the non-valid blood as if it were water, and then we see, well, would it change the color if it were water? Then it's no good. But if it would still look like blood, even if it were water, then it's okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer and Dam Mebatel Dam. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the first two cases, but not with the third case, because blood cannot nullify blood. Once there's blood there, actually this is a kula in this case, because when he says it doesn't nullify it, that means the original blood from the korban still is there and does not get nullified. So even if you have just 1 ounce of good proper blood from the mizbeach and 1,000 ounces of improper blood from a different animal, it's not batel. And as long as you're sprinkling, and there's enough in that sprinkling from the original that blood that you're doing, so then that's okay. That blood is okay. You're just sprinkling the blood with other stuff. Okay, who cares about the other stuff? And the blood that you're sprinkling is still considered proper blood. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ushnehem Mikra Echad Darshu. Rabbi Yochanan notes that both Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda derive their opinions from the same pasuk, but with different interpretations. Velakach midam hapar umidam hasair. Hadavar yadua shedamo shel par merubeh midamo shel sair. Now, on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol brings a par and a sa'ir, the blood of each of them, and brings it into the Kodesh, and he sprinkles it in the Kodesh Kodashim, and then he sprinkles it onto the parochet, and then onto the mizbeach. And the last sprinkling on the mizbeach, the ones before, he sprinkles the blood of the par separately and the blood of the sa'ir separately. Chat lemala, sheva lemata, 8 all together inside, 8 on the parochet. But then when he comes to the mizbeach, then he mixes it together and sprinkles the mixture onto the mizbeach. Now, how could he do that? How could he mix them together? Especially, the problem is that there's a lot more blood from a cow than there is from a goat. So everybody knows that there's more blood from a cow than a goat. So if you mix them together, then you might have a problem that the blood of the goat then will be nullified in the blood of the pod, and then you're only sprinkling the pod blood and not the sa'ir blood. So how is that okay? Rabbanan sabre mikan na'olin she'en mebatelin ze et ze. Rabbi Yehuda sabar mikan namin bemino she'eno batel. So each sage learned something different. The rabbis learned from this that when you have two sacrificable items, two things that will go on the altar, and the blood is going to be sprinkled on the altar, they do not nullify each other, because these are each independently very important items, and something, when you say nullified, means it's not important anymore. And therefore, even if there's more blood from the cow than from the goat, but each of these are sacrificable items. They're both blood that goes on the mizbeach, and therefore they do not nullify one another. If it's something else, if it's water or wine or regular non-sacrificial blood, those all will nullify the proper blood. But sacrificial blood does not nullify other sacrificial blood. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda learns a wider law that in general, if two things are of the same type, they are not, one is not batel to the other. This oftentimes is going to be a chumrah, because that means if non-kosher meat falls into kosher meat, and they're the same taste, same exact taste, then even if it's just a small amount, it will not be batel. If it's the same type of item, then it will never be batel. So even one in a lot will not be batel. So generally, this is going to be a chumrah. In this case, with the sacrificial blood, it is a kula, because as long as you have some blood, that's that valid blood, and it falls into other blood, as long as it's min bemino, the valid blood remains the same. In this case, actually, they're both valid. One's a goat, one's from a cow, but each one retains its original identity. Neither nullifies the other, even if there's more cow blood than goat blood. But Rabbi Yehuda learns a more general rule from this. Now we ask about each opinion from the other. How come the rabbis limited their lesson of this, from this Yom Kippur example, to only things that are put on the Mizbeach, that they don't nullify each other? Why doesn't he agree with Rabbi Yehuda and say that from here we can see min b'mino? These are two types of blood, so we can learn in general that min b'mino is not batel. Ashminan min b'mino velashminan olin kedeka amart. Hashtad ashminan olin mishum de olin. And the answer is, if the example halacha had been a case of min b'mino that was not something that was holy that goes on the mizbeach, then yes, we could learn that law of min b'mino. But since the example that we're learning from happens to be two items that both go on the mizbeach, two types of blood that go on the mizbeach, so then we can't assume that's only because of min b'mino, because the example, we could only learn from an example, from the particulars of that example. And this example from Yom Kippur is two things that go on the mizbeach. So therefore, they're going to limit their lesson to two olim will not nullify each other. Now we ask about Rabbanan, how come they only learn olin? Why don't they say, you know what, it has to be both? Because what if you have two things that are offered on the Mizbeach, but they're of different types? So according to Rabbanan, it would also not be nullified. But who says? Maybe in order to not be nullified, let's learn both things from this example. In this example of Yom Kippur, it is two items that are placed on the Mizbeach. It also is both blood. And so maybe only if it's min b'mino and also go on the mizbeach, then it's not batel. But if it was two olin, let's say if two different items that both go on the mizbeach, let's say wine and blood, but yayin nesech, wine that's for the mizbeach, and blood that's for the mizbeach. So Rabbanan would say, oh, these are two olin, so they are not do not nullify each other. So both are good. But there's not bin b'mino. So why didn't? But the example you learn from is bin b'mino. Kashya. We leave that as a question. Now, the same exercise the other way around. Rabbi Yehuda says, now we learn in general that any bimino, even if it's not sacrificial items, will not be batel. The dilma mishum de olinhu. Wait, how do you know that this is talking about just because min bimino? Maybe the reason it's not batel is because these are sacrificial items that go on the mizbeach. Yesh minan olin. Min b'sheno mino kidekamat. And Rabbi Yehuda can answer, if the example that we're learning from was two things that go on the mizbeach that are not the same type as each other, then yes, I would learn olin, like the rabbi said. But that's not the example. Since the example is both types of blood, that's why I'm going to learn that any two types, the same thing, do not nullify each other. We ask the same question. Well, you only want to learn the rule from the particulars of the case. Fine, but this case has two things. It's min b'mino and it's olin. So maybe something is not batel only if it has both of these aspects, but if it's just min b'mino and it's not something holy, maybe it would be batel. We leave this also as a question. And now finally, the reason why we brought this whole Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim is to ask a question to Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, Tenan. Rabbi Yehuda omer, b'minchat kohanim, minchat kohen mashiach, minchat nesachim, pesula. Shezo belilata ava, vezo belilata raka, vehen bolot zo mizo. Vechi bolot zo mizo mayhave, min biminohu. In our Mishnah here in Masechet Menaḥot, Rabbi Yehuda said that if you have a korban mincha that Kohanim bring, or the Kohen Gadol brings, and that some of that mincha, which is all burnt, it gets mixed up, minchat kohanim or minchat nesachim or something that goes with korban, if any of these gets mixed up with a regular kometz, then that whole mixture is pisula. You cannot burn it. Why? Because they're different ratios. Some of these are 3-to-1, some of these are 1-to-1, and so the 1-to-1, the kometz is going to be thick, and the other ones are going to be thin, and they're going to absorb from each other. Now we ask, so what if they absorb from each other? Aren't they all the same? Oil, this is oil, and that's oil. So oil of this type got mixed up with oil of that type. But you just said, as long as it's the same type of item, it's not batel. And therefore, we're not going to say that the one that has a lot of oil is going to nullify the one with a little oil. And therefore, it's going to mess it up. No, the oil remains separate, even though it's all mixed together. It doesn't nullify it, so the oil for the kometz remains that for the kometz, and the oil for the other one remains for the other one. There's no problem. So how come Rabbi Yehuda says pasul if he indeed says that min b'mino eno batel? And the answer is Amar Rava, Kasavar Rabbi Yehuda, Kol shehu min b'mino vedavar acher, seleket mino kemisheno, v'she'eno mino rabe alav umebatelo. This case is different from a regular min. It's not like just blood and blood that gets mixed up. Here, it's oil gets mixed up with other oil, but there's also another thing here, which is the flour. So this is min b'mino vedavar acher. You have something that gets mixed up with another mixture, where that mixture has some things in that mixture are the same mino, and some are not mino. What do you do when you have this complex kind of mixture? So the methodology is we mentally consider it as if the mino is not there, and then we see if there's sufficient amount in the not mino to nullify it, which happens in this case. Here, the min b'mino is the oil. So we have something with a lot of oil, something with a little bit of oil. So you know what? Forget about the oil of the kometz. And now let's focus on the flour of the kometz. There is more flour of the kometz than there is of all the other oil. And therefore, that flour, since now it's been b'shenomino, flour and oil are different types. There's more flour than oil, and therefore the flour will nullify the oil. That's the problem. If the flour nullifies the oil, now we're no good. And so that's now already going to be considered min b'she'enomino. And once the oil of either one of them isn't good, could be the other way around. The oil of the 3 log of oil is too much for the other flour, and therefore it will nullify it. So anytime it's min b'she'enomino, that will make it nullified, and the fact that some of it is min b'mino is not going to help. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.